ﷺ, but it doesn't actually resemble him. There's a kind way of saying it's still here, but we're not going to take it down. So this is what happened. So we see that at least in the beginning, the foundation of the USA, there was a large respect for the Prophet ﷺ, a large respect for Islam, and there weren't too many problems. Now we're going to fast forward a little bit. We're going to fast forward to the Nation of Islam. Anyone's heard of the Nation of Islam before?
This is like a black organization. They are telling that they are Muslims, but they are
No.
they are like racists.
What actually happened? You had a group called the Nation of Islam. And it's a beautiful name, sounds nice, Nation of Islam. Do we belong to the Nation of Islam?
Yes. We all belong to the Nation of Islam.
Yeah, the name itself sounds nice. But the way it actually started, because you had a lot of black equality movements. Because even after, slavery was abolished, in theory they said all men are equal, all of these things. The reality was you still had, segregation.
They were still mistreated.
Yeah, they were very, very mistreated. So a lot of the, the blacks, the African Americans, were saying, where are our rights? So you had a lot of movements jumping up. Some are political movements, some are religious movements, and then you had some, secret society movements. And there was one group called the Moorish Science Temple. The Moorish Science, Moorish comes from, Moors, the Moors of Andalus. They were inspired by the Muslims of Andalus. The reason why they started this organization is they wanted a black version of Freemasonry. They said the whites have Freemasonry, they won't let us join, so we'll have black Freemasons. So they invented their own, tale. Like Freemasonry took the tale of, the building of the...
And they use Islam because Islam is like always in fashion.
No.
As we saw in the last episodes.
Indeed. So like the Freemasons, took their tale of the building of the Temple of Solomon, they took, Andalus as their prime thing, the Moors. And so this group began. And they had a member, his name was W.D. Muhammad. His name was Wallace Fard Muhammad. Now, he was the person who actually became responsible eventually for the Nation of Islam. We'll stop here, inshallah. I'd love to talk about the Nation of Islam after this break, inshallah. There's so much. It's a major point of the history of Islam in the USA. So, dear viewers, do stay tuned. We'll be back with you in a very short moment.
Our legacy. Our legacy.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome back to your viewers. We're here looking at the history of Islam with a special focus on the history of Islam in the Americas. Now, as we're discussing the Nation of Islam, there was a man, his name was Wallace Fard Muhammad, and he came up with this like a new religion, and he had a disciple named Elijah Muhammad. Now, what had happened is once Wallace Fard Muhammad died, Elijah Muhammad basically said that Wallace Fard Muhammad was Allah. He said Allah came to earth in the form of a black man. Allah is a black man, and Elijah Muhammad said he is the prophet of God. So Elijah said he's a messenger. He said we're Muslims, meaning we follow Muhammad ﷺ, but he's another messenger. So this is kufr on two fronts. Number one, saying a man was Allah. Second, saying he is a messenger of Allah. So this was the belief of the Nation of Islam. So what had happened was this group, the religious reasoning, what they said, was absolute absurd. But as a political movement and a social movement, they were very successful. Because they gave pride to the black people, to the African Americans, saying, stand up. And they had a very charismatic preacher, whose name was?
Malcolm X.
Malcolm X. Everyone knows Malcolm X.
Because it was a movie.
The movie of Malcolm X is a very good movie to see. You could say he was one of the heroes of Islam in America, rahimahullah. He joined the Nation of Islam, and he became like their spokesperson. And he put pride into the hearts of the Muslims.
Sorry, Unitron, but I think you're forgetting another hero that came out from this movement. Can anyone guess who he is?
Who is the other hero?
Muhammad Ali.
Muhammad Ali.
How can you forget?
I was almost going to mention him. He's next on my list.
Sure.
You're jumping the gun here. Now, Malcolm X, as we're saying, he was a very wise speaker. He was really in contrast to Martin Luther King. Martin Luther King was talking about peace and forgiveness and this. Malcolm X was complete opposite. And to quote one of his sayings, he said, "Be peaceful, be courteous, obey the law, and respect everyone. But if someone puts his hand on you, send him to the cemetery."
Yeah.
And this is what he was teaching the African Americans.
But we just say that this organization is not موحدون.
They weren't Muslims. But what happened, this is why we're focusing on Malcolm X. First he put pride into the hearts of the African Americans.
Unified them.
He
Unified them
to a large degree. And then we see he actually made Hajj, because he didn't get along with Elijah Muhammad. He found this man was a munafiq, and he was sleeping with lots of women, he was having illegitimate children.
He left the Nation of Islam.
So he left the Nation of Islam and he went for Hajj. And when he went for Hajj, he saw, white Muslims, blonde-haired, blue-eyed Muslims from Eastern Europe.
All different kinds of Muslims together, drinking from the same cup, everything.
Exactly, and he saw racial unity. He went to North Africa and he saw, North African leaders who were white Muslims.
And this was not the kind of Islam that he was actually initially presented with by his leaders, Elijah Muhammad, etc., etc. They all gave him this distorted version of Islam.
Indeed.
But then he went out on his own personal journey after he, I guess, deviated in a good way, of course, from the NOI, the Nation of Islam, and then, mashallah,
and he found the truth.
He found the truth.
He left the Nation of Islam. Along with him was Muhammad Ali, the famous boxer. He also left.
Many of the believers of that movement.
What had actually happened was the son of Elijah Muhammad. His name was Wallace Muhammad. Later he changed his name to Warithuddin Muhammad. When Elijah Muhammad died, he took over. And all of his life, he always said, I don't believe in this nonsense about a black man being Allah. He was a pure Muslim, Ahl Sunnah. So after his father died, he took control of the Nation of Islam, and he told the people, my father said all these things. He was just, preparing you for the truth. And the truth is we're Muslims. And he got the majority of them. 2/3 of them joined mainstream Islam. This is the largest conversion, perhaps in almost history, where you had so many people, 1/3 of the Muslims today in the USA are African American converts from this time. So, Warithuddin Muhammad, he only died a few years ago, rahimahullah. May Allah have mercy on him. He did an amazing job bringing the people to Islam. Now, of course, you still have today, a man, his name is Farrakh Khan. He actually revived the Nation of Islam. So they do still exist. But, their beliefs are absurd.
And
they are weak moment.
They're very weak.
They reunite with Malcolm X.
No, Malcolm X, by this time he died, rahimahullah.
I think that he was
killed.
He was killed because
he was actually
Muslim.
killed after leaving the Nation of Islam. May Allah accept him as a shaheed. Now, jumping forward a little bit, it's going to be hard to tell everything in a complete story. I'm just going to get some interesting points, inshallah. There's a symbol of Islam. It's no longer existing, but there was a symbol of Islam in the USA. A famous building, one of the most famous buildings in the history of the USA. It lives in infamy. People are going to know about this building for the next few hundred years because of how famous it was in the USA. It was a symbol of Islam. A symbol of Islam before it was destroyed.
What building?
What is this building?
The Twin Towers.
The symbol of Islam.
The World Trade Center. A symbol of Islam.
How are they a symbol of Islam?
Now you're going to say, what are you talking about, Musa? I mean, these were destroyed in 9/11. Let me tell you, this is just to show something amazing that you don't always hear about. What had actually happened was the World Trade Center was built by a Japanese-American architect. His name was Minoru Yamasaki. Now, Minoru Yamasaki, he actually worked in Saudi Arabia for the Bin Laden family. The Bin Laden family, we know, they're in construction. They built many buildings. And one of the ones they built was the Dhahran International Airport. And the Dhahran International Airport, you see, it has a use of arches. You've got the Islamic-style arch. The Dhahran International Airport, designed by this, Japanese-American, used these arches. And he loved these arches so much that when he was actually employed to build the World Trade Center, you'll see the World Trade Center, it was made up of many steel pillars. And at the bottom, they had this arch, almost identical to that he used in the Dhahran International Airport, the two arches. Now, he said himself, he didn't directly say it himself, but it was quoted from him, that he designed the Twin Towers like Masjid al-Haram in Mecca. Masjid al-Haram in Mecca, and the mosque in Mecca. You see in Mecca, you have the two minarets. There's 4 of them, the 2 minarets together. Look at the World Trade Center. It looks like 2 minarets.
There's actually something in the middle of between the World Trade Center, and it symbolizes the Kaaba.
Yes, this is exactly what I'm getting to. First, you've got the minarets. Second, you've got the Islamic-style arches. Next, you've got the World Trade Center Plaza, as you mentioned, which was designed to represent the mataf, the area where you make tawaf. And when you look at it, you can't help but see the resemblance to the Masjid al-Haram in Mecca.
So the building, which in some part for many years was the biggest buildings, the world was inspired by the Masjid al-Haram in Mecca.
Exactly. And you found in the middle there was actually an architectural thing called the sphere.
Yeah.
And the sphere used to rotate anti-clockwise once every 24 hours to represent Tawaf. So like the Muslim circumambulate around the Kaaba.
So what did it use for? For people to pray?
I mean, this was for people to enjoy, sit down, have their lunch. But he stated, this is a man who worked in Saudi Arabia.
Symbolism behind it.
Yes, there's a lot of symbolism.
Not for Islamic purpose.
Not for any Islamic purpose.
Did he convert to Islam?
No, he didn't. No, unfortunately not. Now, what's interesting, of course, is, as we know, the Twin Towers were destroyed in 9/11. This is one of the major turning points for Islam in the USA. We saw after this, going from the freedom of religion in the forefathers, we know when 9/11 was, the World Trade Center is now being rebuilt and all of these things, some Muslims wanted to build a masjid 5 blocks away,
Yes.
Park 51. It's still going on now.
Right next to Ground Zero.
It's 5 blocks away.
Yeah.
And a lot of people said, no, you can't you can't build a masjid 5 blocks away from the World Trade Center. Now this is rather ironic. The World Trade Center was built as a testimony to Masjid al-Haram in Mecca, and now you're saying that you can't build something 5 blocks away. This shows the mentality that really changed the USA after 9/11.
No, they don't know because they are learning history in the Christocentric view. And unfortunately, a majority of Muslims are also learning. They are also know the facts.
Some Muslims.
Some Muslims. Like they are no facts. Like they are a Christian. They are like you see him.
Taking it from their point of view, sympathizing with them. As Muslims, we look at it from this perspective. Now, what I want to do is I want to give one small example of what happened in Lebanon. After Israel had actually bombed Lebanon, because we know this happened, there was the bombing of Lebanon long ago, there was a synagogue. It was called the Magen Abraham Synagogue in Beirut. It was actually destroyed in this bombing. So the Israelis, they destroyed this synagogue. Now, what had actually happened, you can compare this to the destruction of the World Trade Center. The World Trade Center, they said, you can't build a mosque 5 blocks away. This is not right. Where's the freedom? When the synagogue was destroyed by the Israelis, the Muslim groups actually paid to rebuild the synagogue.
Really?
They said, we don't have a problem with Jews. We don't have a problem with Judaism. Even though it was Jews that bombed us, we don't have a problem with their religion. We only have a problem with political Zionism. And they paid to rebuild this masjid. I mean, where are you seeing freedom in the world now? The freedom that the forefathers of the USA talked about, it doesn't exist today.
Totally goes
It's
against
not
the
freedom.
Constitution.
It is
not
in
freedom,
these countries like Egypt, like Syria. You have the churches which are here for 2,000 years. And if you go to some parts in Europe, in Andalus, in Italy, we spoke about it. We don't have this masajid.
No. So this is the case. We see after 9/11, just to sort of cut it off and end with things here, we see now the USA authorizing their own citizens to be killed, killing Muslim citizens who haven't been convicted of any crimes. We see Sheikh Ali At-Tamimi, one of the greatest scholars that lived in the USA, he's in jail for life for only just speaking out against the USA involvement in Afghanistan. May Allah release him from their hands. So this is the situation of, the high points in America, a few interesting points to know about the history of Islam in the USA, and culminating to where we are now. I wish we had more time to go into more detail about this. Inshallah, we'll possibly continue in one of the other episodes. So may Allah reward you all for joining us. We hope you've benefited from this show, and we hope you too, the viewers, have benefited from the show as much as we have, and we hope to see you for our future episodes. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.